Thank you for this kind introduction, and I will start to say thank you very much for having me here. And I would also say thank you for the opportunity for me yesterday to meet some of you working in Saint-Gobain at a nice dinner event. Thank you for that. I would like to focus specifically on two things today. On the one hand, I would like to speak on the ECOPlatform, the foundation of the ECOPlatform, our goals, and what we would like to accomplish in the future. In the second half of my presentation, I would like to focus on something which we need to discuss much more in the future, and we haven't done that yet. And that is, how do we make use of the information? How will people outside Saint-Gobain make use of the information? How will politicians do it, private consumers? This is very important because on the one hand, if we decide upon a common methodology, and that's very good, and once we're there, how do we make use of the information? So I would like to start to say a little bit about the ECOPlatform, but just to initially say that there is a pressure really on reporting on environmental information. For me, working with LCAs for quite some time, I see a very interesting shift right now, because everything so far has been based on a voluntary approach for companies realizing the value of working with LCAs and EPDs, being in the front line, being competitive on the market, etc. But now there is a shift, which I see will come to, there will be some mandatory obligations for companies to work with LCAs. On the one hand, it's the new 14001 standard, which have 3 shall requirements, that if you are certified to 14001, you need to address life cycle perspective and three specific shall requirements on your environmental aspects, on your environmental goals, and the way you purchase. So if you would like to stay with your certification, the 14001 in the future, you need to adopt a life cycle perspective. The second indication is the new EU directive on public procurement, which now opens the possibility. Now opens the possibility for addressing procurement criteria also on a life cycle perspective. And that is also something which has to be mandatory in the future. This is just 2 very important signals that we have to focus much more on life cycle work in companies. First of all, just a few words about what we consider as something we would like to pass on, talking about environmental product declarations. We see they are objective, transparent, and comparable, because this is the most important feature of an EPD from a market perspective. The information should be able to compare with another product making use of the same rules and calculations. And this is the only international recognized tool where you could make use of comparisons. It's also possible to add up information in the supply chain. At the bottom of this illustration, I would like just to pass on the message that we have 3 different types of communicating environmental performance to the market. We have labels, claims, and declarations. They are quite different, and they are referred to in 3 different ISO standards. But so I would just say, don't mix them up. I know you won't do that, but when I come to the market, they are usually mixed labels and declarations and claims. But now we talk about declarations, which is a quantitative, factually-based information for the market. We, of course, need to recognize the full life cycle, which was addressed already in the introduction. And we usually refer to that as the cradle-to-grave approach, of course. But sometimes when we started to work with international standardization in the construction sector, we realized we need to address maybe another aspect with what we call functional unit to declared unit, and that is just looking at the cradle to gate approach. But when we move from products to buildings, we need to consider that we need to look at and consider the full life cycle on a building concept. That's very important, because we never know on products where they will end up in the final construction and so forth. So we always need to work with the full life cycle when we go from products to buildings. when ECOPlatform at least was started to discuss what we need to do to help to accommodate the market request for good information on products, we certainly realized that there were quite a number of organizations in Europe working with this type of concept, but even though they worked with the same standard, which we now are addressing as 15804, the European standard, and the ISO standard 21930, they interpret the standard a little bit differently. So even though they worked with the same standard, the outcome was a little bit different. And of course, that made the market a little bit distorted, and they would really would like to make an effort to avoid market confusion in the beginning. So the first, I would say, outlook over the different types of actors in Europe was almost something like this. We addressed and found out quite a number of organizations working with the same spirit, but still the outcome of their results was a little bit different because they interpreted standards in a somewhat different way. So that was the whole idea for establishing something on a European market, again on a voluntary basis, and we discussed the possibility of starting a cooperation between these organizations that were willing and having the idea and concern of we need to do something together. Because if we don't do something together, the market cannot make use of it, the politicians won't care anymore. So we need to go together to make all efforts to make use of the standards in the same way, so the market can really make use of it. So the ECOPlatform was officially started its work in 2013, and these are the founding members. With, now on, we have been able to address and join also other members, but these are the ones who started in the spirit of both helping ourselves to work in a more cost-efficient and efficient way, but also to address the market need for useful information on environmental performance of products. So the ECOPlatform, it's a voluntary support, as I mentioned. We will try to work in a very lean way, not to put too much efforts and not to put much costs to the members, but we will function as an umbrella organization, which is important as well. We have now different types of members, and you see some of them here listed in one of the bullet points, and we are a non-profit organization. What is important to finally say that the ECOPlatform is not a program operator. It's not a program operator as the one I mentioned on the map with all the type of organizations. Even though you find EPDs on our homepage, we are just the umbrella organization, hoping to be able to unite different organizations to work in the same way. The principles we have, we would like to develop a common core of EPD information through the standard EN 15804. If you may know, this is the European standard for product category rules in the construction sector. We can that's why we're addressing a core EPD, because if we would like to address something in the full life cycle in Sweden or in Spain, we may have to relate to some national regulation about waste disposal, waste collection, and so forth. So that's why we need also some national addition. So that's why we say the core EPD is the one what we all should fulfill, we should all follow, it should all look almost the same, but then it's possible to add some other information as well. So that's what we are aiming at, to develop a common format for these core data on LCAs. So we would also like to define some rules for how we should cooperate between each other, and that's what we call mutual recognition. Some of the organization has started already working with mutual recognitions, going through their programs, trying to modify them so they look as equal as possible. We're not there yet, but we're working with this concept, and hopefully we will find some common approach in the future that also could be used in another context. We also would like to develop a common quality management and verification rule, which it's as important as many other things. The methodology is one thing, we need to verify it in the same way, because an EPD has to be verified by an independent third party. So the solution or the vision we have for the future is that if we will try to focus on collaboration and to meet the market needs through ECOPlatform, we have the possibility to work and to find these common ways of working, the common way of interpreting standards, and the common way of passing on these messages to the market, to the politicians and the private consumers in the future. So here are the advantages, some of the options. To accommodate different market requests, we also try to stress it should be a credible information. It's very important. We should offer ready-made verification procedures for public procurement, because we think that public procurement is one of the most important aspects in which EPDs could be used in the future. And I just refer to the new public procurement directives, which more or less open the door for EPDs. We would also like to find common ways of communicating the information, and that's what I will touch upon much more in my second presentation, or my second half of the presentation. But it also, I think, is important to say that it should not only be making an EPD or an LCA for someone else outside, because if you start to work with LCA, you improve the knowledge in your own company, the awareness, building up capacity, which is a very beneficial way of being able to efficiently work with product improvements. So you raise the knowledge, you can go much more looking into your own problems in the future and work with these stages in the product life cycle, where you make the most beneficial way of working with the product development. So in the future, this is what we will aiming at. All these organizations will find the common approach for the market, for the politicians, and for the private consumers. So the next item I would like to touch upon is, even though we do have the same common methodology, we add the national regulators, the European regulators, as very important for us to pass on the message in the future, and various other ways, of course, as well. But this is one of the hurdles, and I think we are more or less just about to pass it. But the next hurdle, as I did mention quite quickly in my introduction, is that we may also have to help actors to make best use of the information. If we just leave this to outside organizations, I don't think they are able to do the best approach to make use of the way we are working. So I would say then we need to use the same product category rules. These are the ones that will describe exactly how you should make your calculations and how to report on the format for an EPD. We need to make use of the same set of generic data. Working with LCAs, on the one hand, you need to use generic data on the one hand, and you need to add specific data from your own operations. So we need to go to the same generic database, otherwise we cannot compare the information from the EPD. And of course, the same EPD principles as well from the program operators. The ISO standard 14025 is really the key standard from which we are basing all our EPD rules and requirements and the way of working. And this is just a digest out of the 14025, and I won't read it for you, but you can see it really encourages harmonization, working cooperatively, and to work with mutual recognition. This is also passed on to the audience in the standard. And in the last sentence here, I would like to say something which just focuses on the way we can work to facilitate EPD work. Because if you address a PCR, you have a public product category rule, you need to publicly make that available. And if you start working with EPD, the standards say you should make use of what's available on the market before doing it yourself. Otherwise, there will be a lot of PCRs on the market for the same type of products. Comparisons, of course, I should say. If you work within the company with your own product development, of course, you can use it the way you want, because you always do the same thing. But if you work from an external point of view, that's why we need to go together, as I just mentioned from the work in the ECOPlatform. But if we go out on public websites to find out if there is a PCR for the product I'm working with, it's very, very difficult to find out the right information. This is something we need to work with. The ECOPlatform has just started to think about how should we be able to make PCRs publicly available in a sort of a PCR registry where we can combine and find all our efforts joined together, and that the market will not find a lot of different variations on these product developments and the PCRs. So this is something of an hurdle. This is something of a challenge, I would say, for the future as well, for the ECOPlatform to work with. Because we have to make some of this, use the same rules to, if we compare, for instance, two different types of products, even though we're using the same PCR, we have really to look at specific things, and they have to be really exactly the same formulated and used. Otherwise, we cannot compare it. So there are quite a lot of work right now working with finding a global PCR registry. And there is just a new ISO standard being published called 14027, which says that you should, once you publish your PCR, which you have to do as a program operator, it should hopefully go to a global or a regional repository. So there is quite a lot of thinking, I would say, right now. How do we accommodate that in the future? An idea is to find different types of PCR registers for different types of industry sectors, as this illustration is trying to show you. Here are the global players for working with this concept, and you see that the ECOPlatform is one of them. But this is quite a work all over the world. If you go to the US or some countries in Southeast Asia, you will find the same concern. So this is really a global approach in the future. I would just say very few things, very few addresses to the European Commission's work on the product environmental footprint. You may have heard a bit. Maybe we will hear more about it as well. But the Commission is now working quite hard to find a common methodology to be used for policy making, regulatory means, maybe legislation in the future. And we from the ECOPlatform has a very close dialogue with the European Commission. So there will be a horizontal standard. So the EN 1584 will be the one which will be also accepted by the European Commission. So why do we need it? I think I've said it already. I shouldn't repeat too much, but there is too much information on the market in a different way. There is a proliferation of communication labels and so forth. So that's really why we need to narrow it down to something which is quite useful for as many as possible in the future. I would also just say that we need to also to find good ways of interpreting the information. And now the Commission is working quite hard to find what they call benchmarks. And they are working with average data to find the benchmarks, to find the worst and the best options, etc., as one possibility to being able to interpret the data and make a fair assessment of it. And I would say what the ECOPlatform could do is the possibility not to make use of average data or generic data to make this type of approach, but to make use of the real data on the market. If I add all EPDs registered with these organizations in the ECOPlatform, we have thousands of EPDs. So we could help the Commission by making this type of approach on benchmark based on the real market situation instead, which I think is very important. And that's another initiative we could take from the ECOPlatform to help the European Commission to find something which is very useful. The last thing I would like to say is how do we find these generic data? And I would just quickly inform about another international attempt right now, where the United Nations and the European Commission and the US EPA is working on a global network for LCA data providers, those that present and provide generic data. It's called just the GLAD. It's a long title. It's just being called or referred to as GLAD. This is just a sort of a vision of the idea. In this GLAD organization right now, there are quite a number of countries all around the world trying to also get together to find out how should we be able to also help the community, the organizations, not only to find PCRs on the one hand, which I've just talked about, but to find the suitable way of generic data, the data set that they can make use for their specific LCA calculations. And there you see we are working in different working groups as well. We have the secretariat in UNEP, and about I would say within 1 year there will be a meta version presented by the European Commission, which is meant to help anyone who would like to get the right type of generic data for their own specific calculations. So they should be able to go into one central web portal, which will be at UNEP. They should be able to ask, I need, for instance, a data set on electricity generation in Brazil, maybe, and then it should be able to find out where could we be able to find this information, and for those one asking for it to download it. So there, the nodes which you will find in this illustration are the different types of data providers. And it's interesting to see that all the well-known and recognized data providers are included in the work. The EcoEvent, the Gabi, and you may know quite a lot of others as well. So there is no one outside here. Everyone that is working with this concept is really included in this work as well. So having said these things, there is still much more to do to help everybody to find common PCRs and to find common generic data. And what is important for the United Nations to work with this is the fact that they would like to have also the developing countries to become possible to work with it, not only developed countries. So for the UN, this is very important to provide this type of easy access to PCRs, the easy access to generic data for developing countries. I'm just pushing a little bit with my computer here just to say here are just some of the flags, some of the countries' initiatives to help to store the data and to find good search functions. So I'm just quickly showing you things that are already on the move, already working with, and things that we need to further develop. And as you can see, there's a lot of countries working with this concept as well. So, to the very end of my conclusions, I would like to stress that please make use of labels, claims, and declarations for their specific purposes. I think this is not the right audience because I guess you know it all, but in many cases I have to push this already, not to mix them up. So for product comparisons, try to make use of the same PCRs, of course, and the same type of data set for generic data. If you do that, you have a perfect basis for saying that once we present information, you can really compare the data from the two EPDs, which is the most important feature, I would say, for EPDs. Try to support the global PCR registry. I think we have a lot of PCRs on the market. We could all be helpful to pushing that into this global concept. And in the very end, I would like to also address the fact that it's not very easy for a public procurer to understand LCA, to understand what an EBD stands for, to help them what should I be able to compare, etc. So to help public procurers, we need also to be involved in this process, helping them with all the knowledge we have about LCAs and EPDs because they don't have it. So this is also something I would like to stress. And this is something companies can work with. This is something Saint-Gobain can be helpful with because they have the insight or the in-depth knowledge. So thank you very much.